In a small, peaceful village surrounded by rolling hills and whispering trees, there lived an old woman named Grace. She wasn't wealthy, but she was loved by everyone who knew her. Grace was known for her gentle heart, her constant smile, and her willingness to help anyone in need. Although she lived alone in a modest little cottage, Grace never felt lonely. Every day, neighbors stopped by her home to chat, share stories, and seek her advice. She always had comforting words for everyone, and in return for her kindness, the villagers brought her food, firewood, and whatever she might need. Grace's life was simple, but her heart was full. She found joy in the smallest things: a cup of tea by the fireplace, the songs of birds at sunrise, and the laughter of children playing outside her window. The discovery in the forest, one chilly autumn morning, when the leaves painted the ground in shades of red and gold, Grace decided to go into the forest to gather some firewood before winter came. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and carried her old wooden basket, humming softly as she walked among the tall trees. After some time, she noticed something unusual near a cluster of rocks. A faint glimmer caught her eye, something shining beneath a layer of dirt and fallen leaves. Curious, Grace knelt down and brushed away the soil. To her surprise, it was an old clay pot, half buried in the ground. The lid was cracked but still in place. Grace hesitated for a moment and then lifted the lid. What she saw made her eyes widen in disbelief. The pot was filled to the brim with glittering gold coins. Her heart began to race. She could hardly believe her luck. "Oh heavens," she whispered. "So much gold! I could live comfortably for the rest of my days." For a moment, Grace's imagination soared. She pictured herself living in a grand house with warm carpets, shining lamps, and a grand fireplace larger than her whole cottage. She imagined sitting in an elegant chair, sipping tea from fine porcelain cups, no longer worrying about the cold or food or anything else. The gold turns to silver. However, the pot was heavy, far too heavy for Grace to lift. Still determined, she came up with a clever plan. She found some wooden planks, tied her shawl around the pot, and slowly began to drag it toward her home. The path was long and uneven, but Grace was persistent. After a while, she stopped to rest and wiped the sweat from her brow. Out of curiosity, she lifted the lid again. Her heart sank. The gold coins had turned into silver. For a moment, disappointment washed over her. The dream of her grand home seemed to fade. But then she smiled softly and said to herself, "Silver is still precious. I can still live a good life. I don't need gold to be happy." Encouraged by her own optimism, she continued to pull the pot toward her cottage. From silver to iron. As she moved forward, the journey became even harder. Her arms ached, her back hurt, and her steps grew slower. But she kept going, determined not to give up. After a while, she stopped again to catch her breath and looked inside the pot once more. This time, the silver had turned to iron. Grace stared in disbelief. The coins were now dull, dark, and ordinary. All the wealth she had dreamed of was gone. For a brief moment, she felt tears sting her eyes. "Why?" she whispered to the forest. "Why show me riches only to take them away?" But as she stood there, surrounded by the quiet whisper of leaves and the golden afternoon sunlight, Grace's heart grew calm. She realized something important. Before finding the pot, she had been happy. She had her home, her friends, her garden, her fireplace, and most of all, she had peace. The gold had only distracted her from the blessings she already possessed. With a gentle laugh, she said aloud, "I don't need gold, silver, or iron to feel rich. I already have everything I need." True happiness revealed. Grace decided to leave the pot right there in the forest. She turned around, feeling lighter with every step. When she finally returned home, she placed her basket of firewood beside the fireplace, lit a small flame, and sat down in her old wooden chair. As the fire crackled and warmth filled the room, she smiled to herself. The joy she felt in that moment was deeper than any treasure could ever give her. It was the quiet contentment of knowing that true happiness doesn't come from wealth. It comes from gratitude, kindness, and peace of heart. From that day on, Grace lived exactly as before, simply, kindly, and joyfully. She continued to help her neighbors, share her warmth, and listen to their stories. The villagers never knew about the pot of gold she had found and left behind, and she never told them. But they often said, "Grace must be the happiest woman in the village." And they were right. She had discovered a secret that few people ever learn. that true happiness doesn't come from what we own, but from how we live and love. Grace may not have been rich in gold, but she was rich in spirit, and that made her the wealthiest soul in the village.